Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Wa salatu wa salam ala Sayyidina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa sallam. I'm going to have to start this segment over because my internet connection cut out. And so it died in the middle of the stream. So I'm just going to have to start from the beginning. And hopefully I'll recount things much better. Okay, so we are reading Imam al-Nawawi's Etiquette with the Quran, which is my translation of his Tibyan fi Adabi Hamalat al-Quran. And one of the reasons that I am doing these recordings is I'm trying to get the book to a bigger audience, because a lot of people who really should know about the book and that you would expect would know about the book don't know about the book. So this is one of the reasons why at the end of a recording I ask people to share the videos with other people. And one of the reasons also why I ask them to leave comments, because the way Facebook works is that even if you share something, people who follow you aren't guaranteed to see it. They need to leave comments, they need to leave likes, and then Facebook's algorithm will start sharing it and showing it to a bigger audience. So this is one of the reasons I keep asking you guys to please leave comments, please leave shares, please leave likes. But there's another reason I'd like you guys to leave comments. Yesterday, one of the viewers put down their own takeaways. They put down a little summary of what was in there, the most important points. And I think this is really great because people who do a summary of a lesson will often come up with things that the instructor might not have realized were really important, or in the case of takeaways and practical applications of the material, the listeners and the viewers and the students will often come up with things that the teacher didn't know about. And so if you would put down your takeaways from the lessons, many of them, inshallah, I could then pass on to other people when I teach the book in the future, and also other people who are watching the video and then reading the comments, they also can benefit from those. Now, inshallah, we'll begin the book now. So, the author of our book, Imam al-Nawawi rahimahullah, and may Allah benefit us with his knowledge, said, this chapter, meaning the 6th chapter of the book, the Etiquette of Recitation, is the main point of this book, and it is wide-ranging. So everything up to now has been like introductory material, and it's secondary to what's about to come. Okay, and it's wide-ranging. It's going to cover a huge number of topics. Now, I've mentioned in a couple of the past segments that this chapter is going to get into particular etiquette related to how we actually go about reciting the Quran. So in the past stuff, it had to do with the merits of the Quran, the merits of teaching, the merits of memorizing, the merits of reciting, the merits of studying, and it talked about purifying the heart, and it also talked about some of the general habits that we should have. What he's going to cover in this chapter are going to be etiquettes related to reciting the Quran. Etiquettes like using the two-stick, having ritual purity, facing the Qibla, what to do when you run across ayat related to making a prostration. And as he does this, Imam al-Nawawi is going to often give multiple opinions within the Shafi madhab and then clarify which is the strongest opinion. And many times he's also going to give opinions from the other schools along with the justification of why the Shafi madhab is the best in the world. Okay, that sounded really rude and arrogant and demeaning towards the other madhab, right? Well, one of the things that I want you to pick up as we go through this book is that Imam al-Nawawi, first of all, the guy is talking from knowledge. When he has opinion, it's based on the knowledge that he has and the understanding of that knowledge he has. He's not talking out of ignorance, and he's not talking out of like crass bigotry. The man is giving the opinion that he truly and sincerely considers to be the strongest opinion when you take into account the evidence at hand and you interpret it through the framework of usul al-fiqh that his madhab uses. As a Shafi'i, you would expect that the strongest opinion is going to be the opinion that is closest to the methodology of the Shafi'i madhab. Likewise, you would expect a Hanafi to champion the opinion that is closest to the usul al-fiqh methodology of his madhab. Same thing with a Maliki, same thing with a Hanbali. When you ask a Hanafi which madhab is best, it's the Hanafi madhab. Is there a justification for that? Yeah, because it matches the absolute best usul al-fiqh in the world, which is the Hanafi usul. Right, that's what a Hanafi is going to say, because that's what they think. Same thing with the Shafi'is. And both of the madhabs, along with the Malikis and the Hanbalis, they have arguments and justifications, and they have reasons for the usuli positions that they go through. They have a justified reason for choosing one opinion over the other, and it's not arbitrary. It's very systematic, it's very well thought out. And if you read each madhab's book of usul al-fiqh, and then you use their usul al-fiqh when reading their fiqh with evidence, you will understand why they get to the opinions they get to, and you will often see how strong they are. Okay? When you read fiqh with a pure heart and it comes with evidence, you're more likely to be able to appreciate the strength and the beauty of that madhab. So anyways, Imam Nawawi is a Shafi'i, and he will often champion the Shafi'i opinion when he gives it in the book. Now, when he does it with respect and gentleness towards the other madhahib. He will present the arguments that they use, not the straw man arguments that he wants them to use so that they're easy to knock down. Okay? And one of the indicators that we have the Imam Nawawi's approach in presenting comparative fiqh and evidence is a good approach, is that his Sharh al-Muhadhab and his Sharh of Imam Nawawi Sahih have been accepted, and they continue to be read by all of the madhahib. Okay? So when he gives other opinions, if you're a Shafi'i, don't get too arrogant. Oh, he's always siding with us. Of course he's going to side with us. Or rather, we side with him and he sides with the Shafi'is because it's a Shafi'i book. Okay? If you're not a Shafi'i when you read this book, there's still tremendous benefit in it, because he's going to bring together a lot of issues that you might not have known before. And it would be better to make taqleed of another madhab's fiqh and an issue that you don't know in your own madhab than not to do anything at all. Or at least that's my personal opinion, that we should always try to follow knowledge when possible. It might not be the madhab that we would prefer to follow, but it's better to follow something that we know is based on Islamic principles and evidence than it is to follow something that we know is not. Okay, so we're going to get into various opinions as we go through this, and your job as the reader is really to concentrate on the one that he says is the best opinion. As we read through it, I'll try to explain a little bit about the reasoning that's going on, but I might not always be able to do this. Okay, so enough of me, and let's go back to Imam Nawawi, the important guy here. This chapter is the main point of the book, and it is wide-ranging. I allude to the essence of its objectives for my dislike of lengthiness and for fear of boring the reader. The first things that are obligatory for the reciter are sincerity, as previously stated, and observing proper etiquette with the Quran. One should bring to mind that he is addressing Allah Most High, and therefore should read as if one sees Allah Most High, even if he does not see Allah. Verily, Allah Most High sees him. And this is a very clear reference to the hadith of Jibril alayhi salam, where he comes to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam and he asks, teach me Iman, teach me Islam, and teach me Ihsan. With Ihsan being that you worship Allah as though you see Him, and even if you don't see Him, know that He sees you. Okay, so when we recite, this is something we should have in mind. We should have in mind that our recitation is to Allah Most High, and you should read as though He is watching over you at that very, very moment. Okay, because we know that He is. Okay, something Imam Nawawi doesn't mention here, but he does mention it elsewhere, is not only should you have that in mind, but you should have in mind that what you are reciting is directed at you for your guidance, and it's meant to be pondered and put into practice. Okay, so You need to have sincerity, and you need to have ihsan, so you need to have ikhlas and ihsan when you read the Quran. Now we're going to move into some more physical rulings. And so the first one he mentions is, if one wants to recite the Quran, if one plans to recite the Quran, he should clean his mouth with a toothstick, a miswak, or the like. So he says the preference is for the toothstick to be a twig of the arak tree. This is known as Salvadora persica, if you like Latin names for things. You probably know what it looks like, but here you go. This is a miswak. I just pulled this one out of a package. It's been in the package in my house for like 3 or 4 years now, and it's a little bit dry. When I bought it, it would have been nice and moist, but this one's kind of dry. But no problem. It's once you peel it and you put it in your mouth or in water for a few minutes, it gets nice and moist again. Anyways, the preference is for the toothstick to be a twig from the arak tree. It is permissible to use other twigs and to use anything that cleans, such as a coarse cloth or saltwort. Saltwort is another material. I'm not sure what it looks like. It's some sort of herb or plant. The important thing is the miswak is best. Another twig would be fine. Something else that is coarse enough to remove gunk from your teeth is also acceptable, though you need to make sure that whatever you use isn't so coarse that it ends up ripping the enamel off of your teeth and that it doesn't hurt your gums. If you're young, I'm sure your gums can take it, but as you get older, you have to start worrying about damaging your gums. Okay, so anyways, you can use the miswak or you can use something else that takes its place. Today, people are probably wondering most, what about toothbrushes? Can you use a toothbrush? Yes, you can use a toothbrush. A toothbrush will take the place of miswak if that's what you would prefer to use. Although obviously in all cases you're going to have to intend that you're using a miswak or what takes its place. So anyways, he says that if one wants to recite the Quran, he should clean his mouth with a toothstick or the like. People who have read fiqh before, what they should have in their mind when they read that is, well, wait a sec. The general ruling is that miswak is good to use in all cases, right? So at all times of the day, miswak is something that's recommended to use, although there's a difference of opinion whether or not someone who's fasting should use it. Great. And it's emphatically recommended to do when praying, when making wudu, when reciting Quran, when. There's lots of other times when it's recommended to use miswak. One of them is when doing a lesson of knowledge. Okay, so anyway, you can use a miswak, and then he mentions you can use anything that cleans, such as a coarse cloth or saltwort. Okay, so a coarse cloth you could use, or saltwort, or you could use a toothbrush. What if you don't have anything at all? Okay, so the fuqaha have been asked, well, what if I don't have anything at all and I want to do the sunnah so that I get the thawab? Can I take my finger and can I use that? Because, I work outside, I've got a really coarse finger. Can I use it? Well, Imam al-Nawawi addresses this, and he says, as for accomplishing this, meaning the sunnah of using the miswak, with a coarse finger, the companions of Imam Shafi, may Allah grant him and them mercy. And when we say the companions of Shafi, we're talking about the people that studied from him directly, and the next generation or two of Shafis who were mujtahids in the madhab, and whose opinions were the ones that we base everything else on. Okay, the companions of a Shafi have 3 opinions. The most well-known is that this does not accomplish the task. Okay, so we've got 3 opinions. The first, and it's the one that is most well-known, is that using your own coarse finger, it doesn't accomplish the task. The second opinion is that using your own coarse finger would accomplish the task. And the third is that this is acceptable if nothing else is available, but not when there is something available. Now, you might have noticed that I injected the words using your own finger. One of the reasons I did that is that if you look at the reasoning that goes on in the books where they discover this issue, one of the things they say is that you need to make miswak, or what takes its place, using something that isn't part of your body. It needs to be something that isn't you. It's a foreign object that you're using. So obviously your finger isn't going to work. Your own finger won't work because it's connected to your body. You can't clean your body using a piece of your body. That's the reasoning that they employ. So you can't use your own coarse finger. But some of the books would mention that, well, wait a sec, you could use someone else's coarse finger. Now, if you're really zealous about following the sunnah, then that option is there, that you could use your companion's coarse finger too, if you don't have miswak. But you know what? If you really want to do this, it's less gross. You could use like the inner part of your sleeve if you're really, if it's a sunnah that you do all the time and you're going to feel really, really bad about doing it, then that's always an option. Okay, so as for accomplishing with a coarse finger, the companions of a Shafi have three opinions. The most well-known is that it does not accomplish the task. Notice that he says the most well-known here. He didn't just say the first opinion is such and such. What I get from the way that he expresses this is because he gives three opinions and he gives a reason for preferring only one of them. Okay, what distinguishes one opinion from the others here? Well, he gives a distinction that one is the most well-known. So notice he says the most well-known. And then he doesn't say about another one and the most practiced or the one with strongest evidence. Of the three opinions, he distinguishes one. And I would then assume, as a reader, that that is the one that he thinks that we should go with. Okay, so just trying to help you look for things as you read this book to make the most use of it. So what's the issue? The issue is, can you do it with a coarse finger if you need to? And the answer is no, you can't do it with a coarse finger, at least not with your own. Okay, so enough of the coarse finger issue. One uses the toothstick, the miswak, laterally, beginning from the right side. And he makes the intention to perform the sunnah. And some scholars have said that when using the toothstick, one should say, "O Allah, bless me in it, O most merciful of the merciful." Yani, Allahumma barik li fihi, ya arhamar rahimin. Okay, so the basic way of using the toothstick is that you begin with the right side. And we know that whenever the Prophet ﷺ would do things, as a general rule, he would prefer starting with the right. So he would comb his hair starting with the right side. He would put on his right sandal first. Other examples are mentioned in hadith, and there's also specific ones about making miswak, about starting with the right side first. So as a general rule, if there's one thing you're going to remember about how do you do miswak, it's you start with the right side first, and you make the intention when you do it. But there's a little bit more details that we can give about how to do it. Al-Mawardi, one of Ash-Shafi's later followers. Now, later with respect to Ash-Shafi's core early students. Al-Mawardi passed away before Imam al-Juwayni wrote his books. So we're talking about maybe 430. His biography is in the end of the book. The important thing is that when Imam al-Nawawi here is saying one of Ash-Shafi's later followers, he's not talking about like really recent with respect to Imam al-Nawawi's own times. He's talking about a little bit later with respect to the core mujtahid Shafis who really shaped the madhab. Now, when Imam al-Nawawi's age is only 200 years separating him and al-Mawardi, making then al-Mawardi about halfway between Imam al-Nawawi himself and Imam Shafi. But anyways, al-Mawardi, who was a great mujtahid in the madhab, one of a Shafi's later followers said, it is recommended to use the miswak on the outer and inner portions of the teeth. So outer, what's visible. Sorry. I'm in polite social conversation, I wouldn't want to show you my teeth like that, but as part of instruction, it seems useful to do. This is the outer, and the inner then is what's on the other side. So the outer is what's visible, the inner is what's not visible to the person that you're talking to, okay? So it is recommended to use the miswak on the outer and inner portions of the teeth. One gently passes the toothstick over the edges of his teeth bicuspids and molars and the roof of his palate. Okay. So earlier when it said we start from right, what some of my mashayikh have said is that we go from right to the middle, and then we go from left to middle. And then we do the bottom, bottom right, bottom middle, bottom left to bottom middle. Okay, so I realize we've cut off Imam al-Mawardi. We will go back to that in a sec, okay? So you go like this, like this, like this, like this. Then you can do the inner edges if you're going to do the inner edges, and then you should rub it also along the roof of his palate. And this is something that is established in hadith that are in both al-Bukhari and Muslim, okay? That the Prophet ﷺ would then pass it along his palate saying, okay? Because it's like, well, if you stick something into your mouth, you're going to say, So anyways. So then you rub it across your palate, and this will help remove things from your mouth, and it will help freshen the taste of your mouth. When you have fresh miswak, it will leave a somewhat, I don't know how to describe it, but it will change the taste in your mouth. It's a little bit, I think, acrid at first. It will sting you just a little bit, and then it gets quite nice. But anyways, even stinging is a bit of an exaggeration. So anyways, one gently passes the toothstick over the edges of his teeth bicuspids and molars and the roof of his palate. I showed that. They said that one should use an ordinary toothstick, not one extremely wet or dry. You don't want one that's too wet because it's gonna start falling apart. The bark on the outside will just start crumbling, and then you'll end up with lots of pieces of wood in your mouth, and it's really unpleasant. You don't want to use one that's too dry, because if it's too dry, you're going to hurt the enamel on your teeth, and you're also going to scrape your gums, which is really unpleasant. And also, if it's not flexible, it won't be able to move with the contours of your teeth, so you're not going to then really cover the entire surface. Okay, you're not going to cover as much of the surface, because obviously you can't cover the entirety of the surface, because there's going to be places where the fibers of the twig are still too big to get in there. Okay. So they said that one should use an ordinary toothstick, not one extremely dry or wet. And he, al-Mawardi, said, if it is extremely dry, then one should soften it with water. And there's no problem with using someone else's toothstick with his permission. Okay, if it's extremely dry, then one should soften it with water. You can put a few drops of water, and then you just put your toothstick on it. So if you have a cup, you might want to put like a millimeter or two of water on the bottom, and then you just put the miswak, where's my camera? You just let the miswak hang down into the thing, but you don't want to use too much water. You want to use just enough that the bristles are in the water, so that they can then suck the water up into them, and it will make it moisture on the inside. If you immerse the entire miswak into water, or part of the bark into the water, it's gonna go. So if you're going to soften it, don't use too much water. Okay, and there's no problem with using someone else's toothstick with his permission. Oh, that sounds really gross, right? Well, what about your spouse? What if you and your spouse only have one miswak, or you forgot yours? Not so gross now, right? Okay, so the fuqaha are often going to come up with stuff that at first glance it looks kind of strange, but if we start thinking about scenarios that happen, it starts making a lot more sense. Okay, So the idea of sharing your mouse's miswak, I just wanted to bring up something that can show that yes, it's quite possible that it could come up in a situation that's somewhat common and not gross in the least bit. Okay, obviously also sharing miswak between you and other people is going to be somewhat dependent on your society. Some societies are more open to like sharing cups and other things than others. My North American West Coast society, we didn't really share things a lot when I was growing up. Anyways, doesn't matter. When one's mouth is filthy with blood or the like. What's like blood? Well, filth. Light najasa. So blood. Even wine. Some books are going to mention wine. Some other books might mention meat that wasn't slaughtered correctly. Okay, when one's mouth is filthy with blood or something else that is filthy, it is offensive to recite the Quran before rinsing it. Okay, so you should rinse the mouth and then spit out the water so that the mouth itself is no longer going to be filthy. So the mouth isn't filthy and the tongue isn't filthy. Because you, out of respect for the Quran, you don't want to be uttering it while you have filth in your mouth. Okay? So it is offensive to recite the Quran before rinsing it. But is it unlawful? So if someone had a bloody mouth, would it be unlawful for them to recite the Quran? Okay, someone cut their gum because their miswak was too dry. Or someone went to the doctor, to the dentist, and his gums are bleeding. Or he got a tooth pulled. Or someone has a sore in their mouth and it's still bleeding. Someone has a nosebleed and now there's blood in their mouth. Okay, so if one's mouth is bloody, it is offensive to recite the Quran before rinsing it. But is it unlawful? Ar-Ruyani, who is another one of the late followers of Imam Shafi'i, conveyed from his father that two opinions are conceivable. Okay, oftentimes when we read fiqh, they're going to tell us there's two opinions. And then they're not going to tell us both of the opinions. They're just going to tell us one of the opinions. Well, when they do this, it's a shorthand that there are two opinions and they're like the extreme opposites of one another. And then through context, you figure it out. Okay? So, is it unlawful? There's two opinions. One of them obviously is going to be that it's unlawful. The other one is going to be that it's lawful. Okay, that's what's going to pop into your mind. So, is it unlawful to recite the Quran when your mouth has blood in it and you haven't yet rinsed it out? Ar-Ruyani, one of the later followers of Shafi, conveyed from his father that two opinions are conceivable. Automatically in your mind, oh, halal, not haram. Unlawful, not unlawful. And then Imam al-Nawawi says, the soundest one being that it is not unlawful. Okay, so it would not be unlawful to do it. Now, notice that he already told us it's not unlawful, which means it's going to be offensive, right? Now, why would he still ask the question? Because offensive here, is he talking about offensive as in fiqh offensive, or is he talking about it being just blameworthy in general? That might be one of the reasons that he's doing this. I'd have to go back and look in the Arabic. Because if we remember, blameworthy, something that Allah can censure and blame us for, things like that fall within the realm of the unlawful and the offensive. Whereas things that are permissible fall within the realm of the halal, the wajib, the mustahab, the mubah, as well as the offensive. So anyways, enough of this. This is something that is more appropriate for a book of usul al-fiqh. So how much more is there? Okay. So we'll read the rest, but I'll try not to add too many comments as we go. Next, Imam al-Nawawi gets into the issue of having ritual purity when reciting the Quran, and he says it is recommended to be in a state of ritual purity when reciting the Quran. And here he's talking about minor ritual impurity. Okay? excuse me. So here he's talking about having wudu. So not only not being in a state of janaba, which you can't be, but it's also recommended for you to have made ablution and not broken it when reciting the Quran. It is permissible to recite in a state of minor ritual impurity, hadath, according to the consensus of the Muslims, and the hadiths concerning it are many and well known. Okay, so you had wudu and then you broke wudu. Can you recite Quran now? Imam al-Nawawi says, yes, you can. It's permissible, and there's even consensus about this. So if you don't have wudu, but you could, it is still permissible for you to recite Quran from memory or from looking at it but not touching it. Okay. And there are many, many hadiths concerning this, and they should be well known. So no one really has an excuse for coming along and saying, nope, you got to have wudu to recite the Quran. It's haram if you don't. Imam al-Haramain al-Juwayni said that one should not say that one has committed something offensive if he recites with minor ritual impurity. Rather, he has neglected what is best. So Imam al-Haramain al-Juwayni, who's the author of the Waraqat in Usul al-Fiqh, which is another one of the books that I translated, and he is also the main sheikh of Imam al-Ghazali. Well, Imam al-Haramain said that one shouldn't say that reciting without wudu is offensive. Rather, he's neglected what is best. Interesting. If one does not find water, he should make tayammum, dry ablution. Okay, so what do we get so far? It's really good for you to have wudu when you recite Quran, but if you don't, you haven't done anything offensive, but you've done something that's not optimal, and it's not the best, and it's not the most meritorious. So you should never let not having wudu, you shouldn't let that be the only thing that prevents you from reciting. Okay, if one does not find water, he should make tayammum, dry ablution. And the ruling concerning a woman with istihada, abnormal vaginal bleeding, which she is otherwise considered pure, is similar to that of anyone with minor ritual impurity. Now, this is a really complex issue, and explaining to people when those cases would be is beyond something I can do in this book here. It would take more than 20 or 30 minutes, which is how long I want to do a segment. So what I'm going to do is instead I'm going to direct you to a website called fiqhapp, fiqhapp.com. And in there, there's a little decision-making tree that would help a woman determine what her rulings are. And this really is something that's covered in fiqh of purification. And there are many classes that you should be able to find online or in person that go over the fiqh specific to menstruation and istihada. So I'm not going to get into this in details. So what does he say though? The ruling concerning a woman with istihada when she is otherwise considered pure is similar to that of anyone with minor ritual impurity. So if a woman has istihada and it's during the part where she behaves as though she has purification, then she has the same ruling as someone who has minor ritual impurity. But if she's in the part of the istihada where she's treated as someone who has menstruation, then it's not the ruling for her here. All right. It is unlawful for a person in a state of major ritual impurity or during menstruation. Okay, so someone who has major ritual impurity due to orgasm, sex, or during menstruation, to recite the Quran, okay, during menstruation or nifas, or before they have made purification from it, to recite the Quran, whether it is a verse or even less. Okay, so someone who has had intercourse or had an orgasm, or a woman who is menstruating, or a woman during nifas, it is unlawful for these people to recite the Quran even if it's less than a complete verse. But it is permissible for them to silently peruse the Quran in their hearts without uttering it. So it's unlawful for them to pronounce it, which is what's required for recitation, but it would be permissible for them to go over it in their hearts without uttering or pronouncing it. And it's also permissible for them to look in the actual written text of the Quran and to go over it in their heart. So if someone has a test, for example, and they can't do audible recitation and they really need to do the review, well, the option is they can still review it in their mind, which is going to be useful. But what if they made a mistake or they need to double check things? Fine. You can have someone open the page and show it to you. If they don't know it, then they can open the page and they can show it to you. Okay? So it is permissible for them to silently peruse the Quran in their hearts without uttering it, and to look in the actual written text of the Quran, the Mus'haf, and to go over it in their hearts. So they're barred from reciting the Quran, which means uttering it. They can still review it in their mind and in their heart, and they can look at the page. They can't touch it and they can't utter it. The Muslims have consensus that it is permissible for a person in a state of major ritual impurity or during menstruation to say Subhanallah, La ilaha illallah, Alhamdulillah, Allahu Akbar, and to offer prayers of salutation upon the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam and other adhkar. Okay, so even though someone in the states we mentioned above, basically when having janaba or during menstruation, even though they can't recite Quran, they can still use other adhkar. So they can say Subhanallah, La ilaha illallah, Alhamdulillah, Allahu Akbar, and they can make prayers upon the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam and the various other litanies. Okay, there is consensus on this one. Our Shafi companion said that it is the same of if one says, Ya Yahya, khudul kitab bi quwwatin, O Yahya, hold fast to the book, or the like, but not intending by it the Quran per se. So this one is weird, right? So suppose that there's someone named Yahya that comes in and wants to talk to you while you're in a state where it's unlawful to recite the Quran. Could you could you quote a verse of the Quran but not intend it as Quran per se? You can. Whether or not this is in good taste and whether or not you should, this is a different issue. Would we say you've done something haram? No. Why do we care? Because there are parts of the Quran that we do use for supplications throughout our day, and we need to have a ruling for that. Okay, so he says this is permissible. It is likewise permissible for both of them, the person with major ritual impurity and the woman during menses, to say, Inna lillah wa inna ilayhi raji'un, in response to some calamity, if they do not intend it as recitation of the Quran per se. So what have we gotten out of this? What we've gotten out of this is that even though a woman or a man in major ritual impurity cannot recite the Quran as Quran while in that state, even if it's less than a verse. Even though they can't do that, they can use a part of the Quran that is used on its own as a supplication, provided they're intending its repetition as supplication or dhikr and not Quran itself. Okay, so if someone in those states says Inna lillah wa inna ilayhi raji'un, which is a quick reaction. When someone tells you something bad has happened, you immediately say it, right? When you say it, are you intending recitation of Quran, or are you intending it as a supplication? You intend it as a supplication, not as recitation of the Quran. Statements like that are fine. Our Shafi companions from Khurasan and the Shafi madhab, the late Shafi madhab, tended to divide up into two major geographic regions, one of them being Khorasan and one of them being Baghdad. People of each camps weren't confined to those areas, but those are just the basic geographic units that we talk about. So our Shafi companions from Khorasan said that it is permissible for them when mounting a riding beast to say the dua for riding, which is Subhanalladhi sakhkhara lana hadha wa ma kunna muqrinin. Glory be to him who has subjugated this for us. Otherwise, we would not have subdued them. When we ride our horse, oh wait, you don't ride a horse and you don't ride a camel, right? Okay, we ride cars today, and we ride buses, and we ride trains, and we ride planes, okay, and we ride boats. Probably not too many of us do that, but anyways, we use other modes of transportation today. When we get into our mode of transportation, there's a dua that we are recommended to say. That dua is a verse of the Quran. Is it permissible for us to say it if we're in a state of janaba or if we're menstruating? And the answer is that yes, you can read the supplication as a supplication, but you can't read it as recitation of the Quran. Okay, and also you can say, Allahumma atina fi dunya hasana wa fil akhirati hasana wa qina adhab an-nar. Oh Allah, Lord, give us what is good in this world and what is good in the hereafter, and keep us from the torment of the fire. This again is another very common supplication that people will probably make throughout the day, and it is permissible for us to do it provided we intend it as supplication, prayer, dua, and not as recitation, tilawatul Quran. So we can say these things when we get into the car, when we lament, when we're just making general adhkar, provided that it does not come into our mind in any way that we're reciting the Quran. Okay, Imam al-Haramain al-Juwayni said that when a person who has major ritual impurity says Bismillah or Alhamdulillah, intending it to be recitation of the Quran, he has transgressed. Okay, and both of those phrases are inside the Quran. So if he says something is mundane, excuse me, by mundane I don't mean of no work, I mean something that you repeat it without really thinking about it, okay? It's commonly said. So if someone with major ritual impurity says, in the name of Allah, which is something we say all the time, we say Bismillah, and we say it all the time, and it is part of the Quran, but when we do it, we're not really thinking about the Quran. Anyway, so Imam al-Juwayni says that when a person in major ritual impurity says, in the name of Allah, Bismillah, and praise be to Allah, Alhamdulillah, intending it to be recitation of the Quran, he has transgressed. Okay, so those are really common phrases that we say all the time. And if you say it with the idea that, oh, I'm reciting the Quran, and you're in a state where it's unlawful to recite Quran, then you have transgressed. You have exceeded the limits that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has placed on us. Okay? Allah has made it clear that He doesn't want us to recite Quran in certain states. But if the person intended remembrance of Allah or nothing in particular, then he did not sin. It is permissible for them to recite something whose recitation has been abrogated. Okay, here Imam al-Juwayni gets into something that I'd rather cover in sciences of the Quran or usul fiqh, but it's going to be here. There are snippets of text. Okay, there are phrases that used to be recited as part of the Quran that were then taken out of the Quran. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala revealed them as part of the Quran, and then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala ordered the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam to no longer recite them as part of the Quran. This is one of the examples of abrogation or nasikh, which is where something that used to be recited as part of the Quran is no longer recited as part of the Quran or included in the Mus'haf. It's very rare. There's a very small number of instances of it, and we need to know what's the ruling of those things. Because some of them, when you read books of fiqh or books of tafsir, they will be mentioned. And so the question, especially if you're reading fiqh, because that's the one that comes to mind where you might be able to actually hold it and read it and all of that, even though you can't recite Quran. Okay, so the question would be, well, could you recite these? For example, there's an abrogated verse of the Quran, and it's the one that Imam al-Nawawi mentions here. Azani wa zaniya Okay, so when a married man or a married woman commits adultery, their punishment shall be stoning as retribution. This is something that used to be read as part of the Quran, and it is the verse that would, if it was still in the Quran, it would establish stoning as a punishment for adulterers. It used to be read as part of the Quran. It's no longer read as part of the Quran because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had it removed from the recitation of the Musaf. So what's the ruling of that? Is it permissible for people to recite something whose recitation has been abrogated, like the verse that he then mentions? Okay. Is it permissible? The answer is yes. Okay, so verses that whose recitation was abrogated are not given the same status as other things that are still in the Quran. It's an issue that doesn't have a lot of practical application for most of us, but it's still something that Imam al-Nawawi included, and it's something that, alhamdulillah, someone like Imam al-Haramain al-Juwayni thought about so that we don't have to crack our skulls trying to figure out which one to give it. But anyways, I'm going to end today. It's gone longer than I wanted. I actually considered not even mentioning the abrogated thing because I think it's an issue that causes confusion for a lot of people. And inshallah, I haven't done that here. It's covered in more detail from what I remember in the book of Sharh al-Waraqat that I translated. It's usually something that's covered in usul al-fiqh, the methodology of jurisprudence, and it's also covered in sciences of the Quran. And it's something that you're not going to have to deal with when you recite from the Quran itself, because the Quran doesn't include anything whose recitation is abrogated. So when it comes to etiquette with the Quran, with the Mus'haf that we read out of, it's an issue we don't need to worry about. So anyways, this is the end of today's segment. As I mentioned in the beginning, if you've enjoyed it, please share it with other people. If you have any takeaways, please put them in the comments. And inshallah, I will be back later. I also wanted to mention that if you're looking for the book, yes, it's available on Amazon. Yes, it's available on, Book Depository. But really, if you can, it would be better for you to buy it from one of the various Muslim bookstores out there so that we support our brothers and sisters who are selling Islamic books. If you're in North America, I think Mecca Books carries it. If you're in the UK, Lou Press carries it. And if you're in Kuala Lumpur, where I am, it's now available at Noor Inai Bookshop in Plaza Damas. And if you're in Singapore, it's available both at Warda Bookstore, and I think it's also available at the Dar al Arqam bookstore. So anyways, it really would be good for you to have a copy of the book in your hand as we read, and those are some places that you can get it. I know it's difficult to get in KL, but there's that one bookstore that I mentioned, Noor Inai, they do have it. So anyways, I'll be back tomorrow, inshallah. Sorry for going so long. And may Allah give us success in putting into practice what Imam al-Nawawi is instructing us in this book. And may He make us among those who recite the Quran, giving it its proper due, in both how we pronounce it and how we understand it, how we reflect upon it, and how we put it into practice. Ameen. Walhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.